Hey Facebook, welcome in. I'm News 8 Chief Meteorologist Eric Snitil. This is something kind of cool that we are excited to do. We are calling this our weather workshop. Obviously, with all the kids being off of school, we're looking for ways to try to keep the learning going. So we're going to provide you some help here. We're going to do this fairly regularly. We are going to cover some science and then especially weather topics of conversation. And this is really neat. I love the fact that this is on Facebook Live to be able to do this. This is kind of like we're in our own virtual classroom right now. You can comment on these videos, and I want you to. This is going to be the big thing. If you've got questions, you want things that you want some answers to, we're going to go back and forth between you and I over the course of this video. We're going to keep it to about 15 or 20 minutes or so, but that's what we're going to try to do. So if you've got topics that you want covered over the course of the next few days and the next couple of weeks, raise your hand. Let me know kind of where you want to go with this. I think the focus is going to be primarily from elementary to middle school aged kids, but you know, we'll touch our bases on a little bit of a lot of things as we start to move forward. Today's conversation, now that class is in session, we're going to start with thunderstorms. Feels appropriate. You know, we had a few storms around even western New York last week. Now that we are in spring, this is obviously a fairly important topic of conversation. So let's start with this. What is a thunderstorm? Oh, we all know what this is, and it's really easy. A thunderstorm is a rain shower that actually has thunder and lightning. And a lot of times, they look like this. You ever see them where we call that anvil cloud shape? A lot of thunderstorms end up doing that. You got a little fat base there, gets skinny in the middle, and then it spreads out up the top of that cloud. So that's what a thunderstorm typically looks like. What do storms end up producing? Well, the big one to call it that is obviously this. The lightning. You ever seen a thunderstorm with a light show like that? There's a couple kinds of lightning, by the way. We're going to cover this later on in a completely different topic, but this is what we call cloud-to-cloud lightning. It's a lot like what it sounds like. The lightning bolt goes from one part of the cloud to another part of the cloud, but it does not strike the ground. We all know that there's another kind, and that's the ones that actually make the connection to the ground, and those are the scarier ones. Those are the ones that can do damage and knock out power. Thunderstorms can do some bad things too, one of which is damaging straight-line winds. This was an amazing shot, I think, out of Arizona from a few years back. This is what we call a microburst, where you get this chunk of air that comes racing to the ground and then it spreads out and it blows a whole bunch of things over. Trees, houses can be damaged. We've all seen this before too. Hail comes out of thunderstorms. Big old ice chunks. Imagine that falling from the sky. Some hailstones, by the way, they can reach over 100 miles an hour. That's like a major league pitcher throwing one of those balls of ice at you. So obviously that could be a pretty scary thing. This particular one, almost softball size, and there has been hail before that has been about that big, bigger than grapefruit. That's some of the biggest hail that has ever been reported. And we all know about this one. This is the big thing that thunderstorms are kind of always afraid to be produced by. This is tornadoes. That's the biggest thing, and fortunately in western New York especially, we don't get many of these, but across the plains and across the deep south, that is obviously a very different story. Now I want you to take a walk with me here. We're going to flip the shots on this. There's something that some of you might have at your house right now that is the best teaching tool, in my opinion, for how a thunderstorm is able to work. So what are we looking at here? You know what this is? This is a good old-fashioned lava lamp. Now you're going to look at this and go, Eric, what the heck does this have to do with thunderstorms? Actually, a lot. So what's going on here with this green goop, which, by the way, is obviously not actually lava. Most of these lava lamps are made out of wax. In this particular case, that wax is green. Watch what's happening with the wax at the bottom. You see how we've got these globs that are going up? Then they stay up there for a little bit. They settle back down. Watch this guy right in here. You see him? It's heating up right now. There's a light bulb underneath this, and it's heating that glob up. Once it heats it up enough, there it goes, starts to rise, up, up, up. What if I told you that thunderstorms actually work almost the exact same way? And in fact, if we could see what was going on in our atmosphere outside of the clouds above our heads, it would end up looking a lot like this. So here's the premise. If I take this apart very carefully here, you see what's at the bottom of this? That's a light bulb. Our atmosphere works almost the same way, except we don't have a light bulb underneath us. We have our light bulb up in the sky. You know what we call that? We call that the sun. The sun is our light bulb in real life. And here's what it's doing. It's heating up the ground, and more importantly, it's heating up, in our case, the air at the ground. So think of our air like this lava. A lot of our weather works on a very basic principle, and that has to do with density. You guys know what density is? If you took a bowling ball, or let's say a basketball, that's a better one, and you wanted to hold it under a pool, what's going to happen if you hold that in the water? It's going to shoot right back up, right? Well, that's density. That basketball is full of air, which is less dense than water. And when something is less dense, you know what it wants to do? It wants to rise because it's lighter. When something is more dense, it becomes heavier. Think of it like that. Guess what that's going to do? It wants to sink. That's what's happening here on our lava lamp. Our light bulb is heating up that green lava, that green wax. As it heats it up, it becomes less dense. It becomes lighter than the liquid around it. So it wants to rise like that until it finds some balance. At the same time, look at this glob right here. What's it doing? It's doing the opposite. It's sinking. Well, why is that happening? Well, think of it like this. It's going up, but this liquid up here, up toward the top, it's cooler. How come? There's no light bulb up there. Hotter at the bottom, colder on top. That's the big concept here. Eventually you get our green lava that goes up, it hits some of that cooler water up here, and that cools the lava down, makes it denser and heavier again. It will then sink until it gets to that light bulb and it heats back up again, and it ends up rising up. So we get this constant cycle here of lava going up and lava going down based entirely on the principle that it's being heated up and becoming less dense. Now that's the big important thing. We'll take this back here over to our graphics and we'll kind of explain how this is working in real life. So we've got a pretend sky here right now. The only difference between the lava lamp that you've got in your house and what's going on right now outside in the atmosphere is that is our light bulb. And the light bulb is in the sky versus underneath us, but it's the same premise. That sun comes up, it starts heating the air at the ground. So now all of a sudden, we've got this bubble of really, really warm air. And what happened with the lava lamp when we heat that lava up? What's it doing? It's becoming less dense, and it starts to rise. There you go. The air is now starting to bubble up, just like our lava lamp. Eventually, if there's enough moisture in the air, we get a cloud that ends up forming, and that's all clouds are. That air is going up like little lobes of lava. It condenses out and it forms a cloud. If that happens enough, if that air keeps getting heated and it's warm, and there's a lot of moisture, now that cloud grows. It's a big old cloud. And if it grows big enough, we end up getting a thunderstorm to form. Lots of weird things start happening, by the way, when that thunderstorm starts to form. Eventually, we get rain and lightning. So remember with our lava lamp, when that lava gets to the top, it eventually is going to sink back down. Kind of a similar concept here. All of that rain is not warm, is it? You ever stand outside in a thunderstorm? Those raindrops are usually pretty cold. Well, cold air is dense. It is heavy. And what does it want to do? Remember, dense and heavy wants to sink. Warm air wants to go up. Cold air wants to go down. When we get a thunderstorm going, there is a mix of those two ongoing. We call that the updraft of a thunderstorm and the downdraft of a thunderstorm, air going up and air going down. Eventually, these two cannot sustain each other forever. One of them has got to win. Which one do you think ends up winning? The blue stuff, the cold air, ends up winning. It overspreads and takes over the entire updraft of that thunderstorm. Once that happens and there's no longer this source of warm air to keep those clouds and storms going, the thunderstorm will end up dying. It has no more energy. It would be like if I took that lava lamp and I click the button and I turn the light bulb off. Eventually the lava would stop moving up and down. It all just globs up at the bottom and it stays parked there. That's what happens with Mother Nature. Cut off its source for all of that warm air. Eventually that cold stuff is going to win out and the thunderstorm will fade away and it will end up dying. Now, one of the really cool questions that I always get with kids is, can you get a thunderstorm in the wintertime? Great question. Do you know the answer is yes? And did you know it's happening right now, today, believe it or not? If you're watching us from western New York, there was lightning with snow about an hour ago. This is the latest view of radar. This is Syracuse, New York. Look at that right there. Wait for it to go back. There was one bolt of lightning in the middle of heavy snow. So yes, it can happen. It happens a lot in the Great Lakes when you get lake effect snow, but it's rare. And here's why it's rare. In the summertime, what is it? It's hot and it's humid. That light bulb is really, really bright. Think of it like that in the summertime. It's not hot and humid in the wintertime, so it becomes very tough to heat up that lava lamp enough to generate an updraft to get thunder and lightning going. Rare, but it can still happen. Just doesn't happen very often. So let's see here. We'll go and answer a few of these questions as I go back. Hey, Mary, we've got Bill joining us. Lisa says hello. Kevin says it is still snowing in Sodus. Shannon asking, does the cold weather cut the virus? We have really not seen a ton of evidence of that, Shannon, but a lot more to be studied there. Hey, Michael, third grader from Brockport is joining us. Marcia says we've got a fifth grader and two kindergartners who are watching this afternoon. Hey, Lauren, got Marilyn, Linda, Sarah, Barb from East Aurora watching us too. Good buddy Dave Bachman. Hey, Dave. Chris asking, how does it thunderstorm at night with no sun? Ooh, that's a good question. So Chris is asking, so how do we, when the light bulb is turned off, get thunderstorms at night? Wonderful question. Well, so we know the concept here of a storm going with warm air at the bottom and then colder air up top. That makes a lot of sense in our heads during the daytime when the sun is up. At nighttime, we don't have anything heating the ground anymore, but sometimes at night, you've got winds coming out of the south that transports warm air and moisture, even without the sun. What's going on above your head, if the air above us is getting colder, we're still creating conditions like a lava lamp of warm underneath and cold over top. It doesn't have to always be with the sun up. The sun obviously plays an important role in that, but you can do it without the sun. If the air coming in is warm enough and it has enough moisture, the air above you is cold enough, you still have less dense here, more dense here, and they want to balance out. So you can end up getting strong and even severe thunderstorms at night. In fact, we call those nocturnal thunderstorms, and they're some of the scariest ones. You can still produce severe weather. You can still produce tornadoes with all of that. It's just a matter of getting that air at the bottom nice and warm and soupy, and the air above nice and cold. How you accomplish that does not always have to be with the sun coming out. It obviously helps doing that, but that's not the only thing that you end up having to do. Hey, Kim, she's got Maddie from first grade who is watching us. Ricky is a second grader from Churchville, Chili, watching us. Hey, Ricky. Marilyn says her grandson is in sixth grade watching. Tina asks, is it cold in the clouds even though it is nearest the sun? Ooh, that's a really good question. The answer to that, Tina, is yes. When you are in an airplane, for example, you are almost always flying in temperatures that are sub-freezing, even in the middle of the summertime. If it's 100 degrees at the ground, you go high enough at the top of that cloud is made of ice crystals. And have you ever noticed when you look at these thunderstorms, especially in the summertime, the clouds at the bottom are more puffy, but you see the clouds up here, they're almost more wispy. You know why that is? They're not made of the same thing. These ones are made out of water droplets. These are oftentimes made out of ice crystals, and that should tell you everything you need to know about the temperature within that cloud. Because it is ice crystals, it's obviously very, very cold up there. That's what creates instability again. You've got the warm air at the ground and the very cold air at the top of the thunderstorm that ends up getting that air rising. And so too, I'll bring this up. This is a topic we'll cover later on in the week. This is how we get lightning. It's because the cloud is not made of the same things. It's all water, but different phases of water. Liquid water, supercooled water droplets, and ice crystals. And all of those mixing together, very chaotic. Think like this. If you're at, let's say, if you're watching us now and you're sitting on carpet, all right, and you don't have shoes on, you've got socks on, what would happen if you just went like this with your socks all over the carpet? You ever done that before? And then you go up to mom and you go, boop. What's going to happen? You're going to give her a little bit of a shock. You are creating a charge with your socks on the carpet. The charge is the same thing that's happening in the cloud. It's like a whole bunch of little teeny tiny socks, and they're all rubbing together constantly and violently until eventually they build up so much energy that you got lightning and you've got thunder. And when it happens a lot, you can get a lot of lightning and thunder. So that's how a lot of that ends up working. Michelle asking, how do ice crystals form? Ooh, great question. Basic level, Michelle, with ice crystals are forming only when temperatures are way, way below freezing in that cloud. What we're getting is water vapor. Remember, there's three phases of water: gas, liquid, and solid. So in this case, water vapor, liquid water, or snow, or ice crystals is the solid part of this. As that moisture gets lifted into the cloud, it condenses. That's the word we call it. That invisible moisture, that water vapor in the air, gets almost wrung out like a sponge. It condenses into either a liquid or a solid in some of these cases. If the temperature is cold enough when we wring out that sponge, you end up with ice crystals that end up forming. So that's how all of that works. Angela says Gio is a 5th grader from Greece, wants to know why it's snowing if it is still spring. Gio, great question. So here's how that works. Spring is a relative word. That means it's not a magic button that we push where we say, all right, all of a sudden because it's spring, we're going to not make it cold anymore. We live in western New York, in a part of the world that often sees snow all the way into April, which is still a month away from now. Even though it's getting warmer, that's why it's spring. The sun angle, Gio, is getting higher and higher. You step outside this week, I think we're going to be 60 degrees on Wednesday, Gio. But there is still cold air that is out there. And sometimes that cold air is able to sneak its way down, not for long during the spring season, but just for enough. It gets cold enough for snow. To your same question, how come we get rain sometimes in the winter? Same premise. Even though in the wintertime it's usually a lot colder, sometimes that warm air is sneaky and it comes on up for a little bit and it's warm enough for rain even when it's wintertime, just like spring. It's supposed to be much warmer, but sometimes it can be cold enough for snow. Julie, how does it rain when the sun is out? Ooh, good question, Julie. When the sun is out, it's only out for a part of the sky. Usually if you're experiencing rain, look up. You will end up seeing a cloud either overhead or nearby. I'll answer this question. Some kids have asked me too, how come if I look up and I don't see a cloud overhead but it's raining? How does that work? Well, I guarantee you there is a rain cloud nearby. It might not be overhead, but it might be in some other direction. Maybe it's blocked by a tree or a building. Remember, we have wind, not only at the ground, but also above our head. There are times when the rain cloud could be a few miles away, but the raindrop is not falling straight down. It is being blown by the wind to you. And even though it's sunny above your head, that cloud out in the distance has blown rain right at you. So you look around and you go, well, how is that even possible? There's a rain cloud nearby. The wind is just playing some tricks on you, blowing all those raindrops nearby. Marilyn asking, when there is a tornado, how does hail form? Well, first off, Marilyn, tornadoes and hail do not have to exist at the same time. They often do, but they don't. What's producing the tornado is a rotating updraft. That is the cloud that is spinning as that air is rising. You get the hailstones that form, they drop, they fall back into the updraft, they melt, and then refreeze as they get flung back up into the cloud. So when you get hail and tornadoes, it makes a lot of sense that they form in the same way, because you can't get hail unless that air is violently rising up and it's very cold aloft. And if you got enough spin in there too, you'll end up producing a tornado. Lots of videos on YouTube that I would encourage you to look at from storm chasers who have gone out there, and they're trying to get shots of a tornado, and they're safe from the tornado, but their windshields and the roof of their vehicle is all cracked because all of the hail wrapping around that tornado got flung at them. So many, many times when a storm is producing a tornado, that's obviously the most dangerous part of that, but there is often strong and large hail involved in there too, because that force of the air going up is what really creates tornadoes and hail. It's the same ingredient, so they exist at the same time very often. Got Nolan, a 5th grader from Cusada. Stephanie says, Nolan is asking, how does that hail form? Good question. So the raindrops are going up, they're getting flung up into that cloud, and guess what? It's super cold at the top, so it freezes. Now you got an ice ball. That ice ball starts to fall. It's falling back into the warm air, where it starts to get coated again with rain. If it falls into the updraft, now it gets flung back up again. So think of it like this. Have you ever made a candle? You know how they make those? So you take the wick and you dip it in the wax, and then you bring it up and you let it harden. Then you do it again. You dip it, you bring it up. You do it again. You dip it, you bring it up. You're adding a new layer of wax, and then layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, you end up with a thick candle. That's how a hailstone is working too. We got this tiny little core, this ice pellet in the middle. It falls, it gets another layer of water around it with the rainfall, then it gets flung back up in the cloud and refreezes. And that process goes over and over and over again until you have enough layers, almost like an onion. If you've ever cut a hailstone in half, you would find that it is just dozens of layers of this process happening over and over again until eventually that hailstone gets so big and so heavy that the updraft can't keep it holding up in that sky anymore. Eventually it gets so heavy it just plummets all the way to the ground. So the stronger the storm, the bigger the hail, because that updraft has to be able to keep on flinging that heavy softball back up into the cloud until it gets so heavy that it is no longer able to stay up there? So that's a really good question. Michelle says, Kayla, who's a fourth grader, wants to know, why don't we get tornadoes in New York? Well, Kayla, we do sometimes, but we don't get them very often in New York, and here's why. Tornadoes form with really two main ingredients. One of them is instability, which is our lava lamp stuff that we talked about. Number two is wind shear. The winds are twisting and turning, allowing for spin. We don't have a ton of those two ingredients synced up in western New York. We're kind of in a cold part of the country. We don't live near the Gulf of Mexico. We don't live across the plains. This is a part of the world that the ingredients here just don't line up. They don't sync up very often. It does happen from time to time, but it's a lot rarer here because we don't get nearly as hot and humid as places off to our south. And quite frankly, a lot of these storms don't take the right track, but it does happen from time to time in western New York. But what would, if you go to Florida in the summertime versus being in Rochester, New York, which place do you think is going to be warmer and more humid? Florida. And storms like warmer and more humid. That's why places like Alabama and Mississippi and Tennessee, they see a lot more thunderstorms, a lot more severe weather, and a lot more tornadoes because their lava lamp basically is stronger than our lava lamp here. So that's a really good question. All right, we'll do one more of these and then we're going to let this go. Michael, a first grader, is asking, he'd like to know if it's possible to have a thunderstorm without lightning. Nope. Easy answer. A thunderstorm means you got to have lightning and thunder, all that is. So if you don't have any lightning and thunder, you could still have very heavy rainfall. You're just not going to have the thunder. You're not going to see the flashes of light. So a really good question there. All right, so we're going to do this again, obviously, as we go forward through the work week here. We'll keep you updated on when we're going to do our next one of these. What I would encourage all of you to do is reach out to me, either on Facebook. You can send me an email. You can find me on Twitter as well. What topics would you like covered? I think the next one we're going to do out of this, I want to get into some depth of how tornadoes form. We're going to talk more about hail and lightning and wind and all of that good stuff. So I think that's going to end up being our next lesson. But I appreciate all of you tuning in here. This video is going to stay live on Facebook, and I think we're going to put it up on our website too, rochesterfirst.com. So if you know somebody who didn't get a chance to watch this and you want a quick refresher on how thunderstorms work, we'll have this little lesson up there on our website for you to watch. And we'll be seeing you again with the next one. Hopefully this has been good stuff for the kids, and we'll see you next time around. Take care, everyone.